From the Citadel of Broken Wings and the Temple of True Fire, high atop Dragon Rock, to the Witless Unicorn Tavern and the Cracked Pearl Gambling Den, deep in the slums of the Dung, the city of Arkand pulses with excitement, conflict, rumors, and the promise of adventure, wealth, power, and glory. How well does this volume fulfill that promise? Well, you're about to find out because I'll be reviewing Dragonbane Arkand City of Waves and Flames from Free League Publishing right after this. Howdy, gang, and welcome once again to the Duct Tape Studios. I'm Jeff McAleer, your host here at the Gaming Gang channel. Thanks for joining me once again. Today, I'll be sharing my review of Dragonbane Arkand City of Waves and Flames from Free League Publishing. This is written by Johan Solberg with artwork provided by Johan Egerkrans and David Rascala. The 172-page hardcover with PDF lands in stores this week, carries an MSRP of $44.99. The PDF is not available as of yet. My guess, it'll arrive when this hits stores, and it should be priced somewhere around $22.99 to $24.99. Just my guess. Having said that, let's swing on over to the other camera, because here I've got Dragonbane Arkand City of Waves and Flames. And that is the last time I'm going to refer to this book like that, because that is a mouthful. A few things to mention before we get stuck in. First of all, my friends over at Free League Publishing were kind enough to provide me with this review copy, but neither I nor anyone else affiliated with the Gaming Gang has received any other sort of compensation for me to share this review with you. And these days, it's important to know that. We're also not going to look at each and every page of the book, but I do want to give you a good feel for what you're going to find inside. Then lastly, this is a Game Master facing book. So if you're a player and your Game Master has pre-ordered this, maybe they backed the Kickstarter and they already got their fulfillment, just haven't started running this yet, keep in mind, there are spoilers ahead. I'm going to stay away from major spoilers, but there will be spoilers. And of course, as I flip on through the book, you are going to see some things which will no doubt ruin some of the surprises of what's contained within. I just want to let you know right up front. Of course, if your GM has been kicking around picking this up, let them know about this review. That way they can approach Dragonbane Arkand and make a far more informed buying decision. Now, before we dive on into the book, let's take a look at the poster map that comes with this. Now, this poster map, this map here is the same that you would find on the end papers. Very cool. I like that. We don't actually have street names in Arkand. I thought that was kind of funny. Sort of like, oh, you want to find this? Okay, well, you got to go past this, make a right. Take about 100 paces. It's kind of okay. Also should mention that the paper stock is nice and heavy. In fact, it's actually the same paper as the end papers. So same paper like this. First thing we'll do is take a peek at the credits page. A lot of folks worked hard to bring this to life. Let's give credit where credit is due. As I mentioned, Dragonbane Arkand is a Game Master facing book. So you are going to find information about the city, its history, what's currently going on. We're going to get information about the 5 districts of the city, although reality is I don't think the underworld should be considered a district, but it is regardless. So in my book, it's 4 districts and the underworld. You'll also get background about 20 different adventure sites, numerous NPCs, a trio of major campaigns, and loads of various different seeds sprinkled throughout, adventure nuggets for the game master to mine. So there is a lot of information that's packed inside this book. We'll also point out, if you're not overly familiar with Dragonbane, the way this information is laid out is unlike a traditional fantasy role-playing game. So we aren't seeing like a linear progression. There is no specific plot line or storyline which needs to be followed. We have various different locations. We have what is the situation there, who are the movers and shakers there, and how do they interact with other factions throughout the city. And then you play to find out what happens in essence. So as a game master, utilizing Arkand and running the campaigns provided within, the campaigns are essentially just ideas of what's actually at play in the city, as opposed to, well, you run this adventure, then this adventure, and that adventure. So this will take a bit more prep work than other role-playing games in order to utilize. I'll be honest, a lot inside here is absolutely worth that preparation time. But some people might think, well, you know, I'd like to have everything just laid out and spelled out for me, make it really easy to run. That is not going to be the case here. So we have a trio of campaigns, and we will get a breakdown like this. These are the campaigns. We got the Return of the Dragon Princess, which is the one I like the most, the Throne of Thieves, and In the Banisher's Service. So as an example, with the Return of the Dragon Princess, it's going to give us the background. It's going to give us a missing princess, a daring rescue, a place of refuge, seeking the legacy of Dundor, unexpected allies, the encounter with Dundor, and a dragon princess on the sovereign's throne. So it's giving us ideas on how this campaign can progress. It's not necessarily telling you exactly what has to happen. Something else that's interesting in Dragonbane Arkand is the encounters. We do have encounter tables for the city as well as each of the districts. And some of those encounters, while they're supposed to be random, actually will lead into specific set pieces at some of these adventure sites. So they do tie in very well. Not all of them, but there are some in each table, which in the adventure sites, it'll discuss, oh, well, if the player characters have run across XYZ NPC and done this, then this is going to be the result. So I thought that was pretty cool. One of the things I'm not super keen on with Dragonbane Arkand is really the lack of information about each of these districts. We just get a little bit. So we get a few paragraphs devoted to that district. As an example, this is the harbor. And then we'll get our random event tables, which are very cool. I like the random event tables. And then we'll dive on into the adventure sites. So as a whole, these districts don't really add up to feel like a living, breathing city. It feels like a location that has a variety of adventure sites. What I would have liked to have seen is maybe even if it was just a page or two, it doesn't have to be tons of information. I would have liked to have gotten an idea of what are some of the merchants in that area, or who are some of the NPCs that the player characters are probably going to encounter. And I don't mean named NPCs, I mean types of NPCs. I would have dug that quite a bit. Now, some of that kind of information is located in the random encounters tables. I would have preferred to have just had it as a separate little section, maybe give us 20 different names and titles and a quick explanation of what that NPC does in that district, such as maybe they oversee the open air market or they're the blacksmith, what have you. We do not have that information. Now, the adventure sites themselves, for the most part, pretty cool. Many of the maps are really nice too. Some of them are rather bland. I'll get to some of those. They tend to be the interiors of buildings where there's really nothing inside them. They're just empty rooms. Whereas we'll have details on some of these other maps. So kind of strange. But as far as the various different locations, they are pretty cool. They are varied. It's not like we're getting the same things repeated throughout each of the districts. So we have from the gambling den to the temple of the endless sea to the theater to the lost academy of dragon riders. Like I said, a lot of variety, a lot of interesting things going on. So that was our harbor. We also have a pirate that you need to deal with. And I think it's kind of funny because at least I would think it's pretty obvious who this pirate is. I would sort of play it out as Superman and Clark Kent, where for whatever reason, no one realizes that Clark Kent is Superman because, well, Clark Kent wears glasses. Superman doesn't wear glasses. I would kind of play off that with this pirate because the pirate is a duck person and they actually wear a steel duck bill when they're in the midst of piracy. In fact, that's the artwork on the cover is that pirate. And they can play a huge role in the adventuring that's going on, both as an adversary and possibly an ally. So we'll get information about the pirates as well as the legitimate ship, because the pirate is also a merchant and they have a legitimate ship, which will transform into a pirate ship when it's out of sight. So I thought that was kind of cool. We've got the dung, which is the slums of the city. Here we have the Witless Unicorn Tavern, which is actually the heart of the criminal elements, sort of where the Thieves Guild is located. We also have the Cracked Pearl, which is a gambling den. And each of these adventure sites will also have some very unique NPCs. And another aspect of Dragonbane Arkand I really enjoyed was the fact that the NPCs aren't all just one note characters. So we don't necessarily have, well, they're the mustache twirling villain or they're the whore with a heart of gold. We don't have those kind of tropes. We do have some important movers and shakers of the city who have various different layers to their characters, which will make them an absolute blast for the game masters to role play. Then we get into the markets. Yes, the menagerie is pretty wild. It's got all these various different creatures there. This is the theater, as I mentioned, the theater of inevitable fates. So just the way some of the factions interact, some of the NPCs interact that I think is very nicely done. So the proprietor of the theater is angry at the proprietor of the Witless Unicorn because the proprietor of the Witless Unicorn is this female halfling who's got the most beautiful voice in all of Arkand and refuses to perform anywhere except for her tavern. And of course, the owner of this theater is upset to the point where they're considering hiring somebody to murder the halfling. Like I said, I found it very interesting how some of these characters interact and how these factions play off one another. One of the big campaigns is the return of the Dragon Queen or Dragon Princess, actually. And that will take place in the underworld. Now, the underworld has a few different things going on. There's a cult of this spider demon who is also vying for control of the city and, of course, to spread evil throughout. And then we have the Lost Academy of the Dragon Riders. Really wild stuff going on in this. But once again, I do have to mention that this is pretty packed with information, and it is going to require a good amount of prep time when you're running this. Something else to keep in mind is it's very easy for your players and their characters to traipse all around the city, and it might be a little difficult to try to keep tabs on everything that's going on because we have so many different NPCs bouncing off one another and all these various different storylines that the players and their characters can essentially create because of their interactions with these adventure sites and the NPCs and such, that it could become a little overwhelming for some game masters out there. Remember, I mentioned how some of the maps are a little bland. So here's an example here. So this is just a cellar. Okay, I don't necessarily expect a ton of stuff in here, but we get the detail for the stairs. We get the detail to this passage, and then the actual room is just empty. It's just a blank. Same as you'll see here. And once again, I'm not expecting every single chair and bed and everything else to be displayed on these maps, but I would have liked to have seen a little bit more detail. So as far as production quality, let's talk about that, because I know there are folks out there who do not like this artwork for Dragonbane. I have gotten comments on previous videos. There are people who feel that it's too cartoonish and it doesn't really represent the game as well as it should. I got to be honest, I love this artwork. Got to keep in mind, I see dozens upon dozens of fantasy role-playing games, and I would certainly rather see this sort of artwork that's unique, that stands out, as opposed to just that typical soulless digital fantasy artwork that we see actually populating many of the more well-known role-playing games out there, such as Dungeons and Dragons. I would go with this artwork every day of the week over 90% of the artwork that Wizards of the Coast includes in their books. Now, it's just an opinion, right? It's just my taste. Something else to mention, I know some folks out there don't like the English edition of Dragonbane. I'll be very honest, I have absolutely no experience with the original Swedish version of this role-playing game. So I can't tell you if this has been streamlined and made simpler. I've seen people say, oh, it's been dummied down. I don't think so. I think this is a fantasy role-playing game that's designed to be easy for players to grasp core mechanics, jump right in and start playing. Is it a perfect role-playing game? No. Is every single aspect of the game covered in the rules? Absolutely not. There's a lot of hand waving, a lot of making decisions on the fly if you're the game master. But still, I dig Dragonbane. I really, really do. But I certainly understand if you're one of these people out there who feels that this is a pale imitation of the original game, which was far more serious, a lot less mirth and mayhem, I suppose. Here is our spider demon. It's pretty cool. Very, very deadly. This is going to be a very, very difficult challenge for the player characters if they even ever encounter the spider demon. There's a lot of stuff in this book that your player characters may never encounter because they just don't happen to go down that adventure path. They don't pick up on that adventure seed. No problem, because there is loads and loads of other material in here. We also have the Dundor's Dragon Rider Academy. this plays a major role in the return of the Dragon Princess and can play out in a variety of different ways, which is also kind of cool. The player characters will have a major decision to make towards the climax of this area, which I really liked quite a bit. All right. As far as paper stock, very, very nice. It's what we come to expect with the Dragonbane releases. Heavy paperweights. Inks still pop off the page, so I dig that. So there's a peek inside Dragonbane, Arkand, City of Waves and Flames from Free League Publishing. Let's swing on over to the other camera so I can share some final thoughts as well as my review score. I gotta say, there is a lot inside Dragonbane Arkand to like. Now, there are some things that I have quibbles with, and I think there are some opportunities that were missed. But all in all, this is packed with adventure and goodness. Now, it's important to keep in mind, this is not laid out like a traditional fantasy role-playing adventure. So it's not linear. It's not go from A to B to C to D or anything along those lines. This is very, very much a sandbox city that the players and their characters can kind of go hog wild in. But there is so much going on. I could easily see game masters out there kind of feeling overwhelmed by everything if they attempt to incorporate everything that's going on in their game sessions. So what I would definitely recommend, see what your players gravitate towards as far as the major campaigns or even the adventure seeds. You might find that you get this major campaign that just emerges from nowhere based on how the player characters react to what's going on around them. That would be loads of fun right there. But if you attempt to include every single storyline, every single interaction that these factions are having within the community, yeah, it's just going to be way, way too much. So find out what the players are gravitating towards, kind of focus on that, and the other things just kind of keep as window dressing. So if the players want to get involved in the return of the Dragon Princess, they certainly can. And then maybe use the conflict for who's going to control the criminal elements of this city kind of in the background. Maybe they hear rumors about it. And if they want to explore that, they certainly can. Or they can just focus on the task at hand. Very easy enough. I do wish that we had more detail about each of the districts. We only get a few paragraphs. And then we get the random encounter tables that kind of unlock more about the various different districts. I would have just liked to have had, maybe 20 different NPCs, just names, and kind of just make a blurb about them, what they do, to kind of maybe bring the city a little more to life, because it does feel kind of disjointed, where it's like, okay, well, here are adventure sites. Here's a little information about the harbor and the pirates. There you go. Right. I would have liked a little more continuity within the city. It's not horrible or anything like that. Just something I think would have been really helpful for game masters out there. Production quality is really, really nicely done. Yes, I know. Handful of people don't like the artwork. The majority of people do, including me. And once again, I will take this artwork every day of the week over that soulless digital fantasy art that we see populating many of the popular fantasy RPGs out there every day of the week. I'm just saying. As far as the adventure sites, the NPCs, the factions, their interactions, all very, very interesting. And you will have a lot of fun bringing them to life with your players at the game table, as long as you don't bite off more than you can chew. So on a scale of 0 to 10, I give Dragonbane Arcane City of Waves and Flames from Free League Publishing an 8 out of 10. All right, that is it for this time out. If you enjoy the gaming gang and would like to support the outlet, you can do so in a few ways. First, by utilizing our affiliate links to the One Bookshelf sites, such as DriveThruRPG, and to do so, simply visit thegaminggang.com, click on one of our banner ads. Then if you happen to make a purchase, I get a commission of 5% on most of those sales. Of course, you can also make a one-time donation by way of PayPal and become a monthly member of our Patreon. You'll find all that information down in the show notes. Also in the show notes, you're going to find an invite link to our Discord server. It's absolutely free to sign up. So be sure to hang with the gang over on Discord. Of course, if you like the video, by all means, please give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you do subscribe, don't forget, ring that bell. And if you ring the bell, select all notifications. Because that way, not only will you find out when I share videos such as this review, you'll also be informed when my live stream, The Gaming Gang Dispatch, airs Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday evenings at 7 p.m. Central right here on YouTube as I bring you the latest in tabletop role-playing game news and more. And of course, when you're not watching videos on the channel, be sure to visit thegaminggang.com for all latest in tabletop gaming news, reviews, and a whole lot more you will never see here on YouTube. You know the drill. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. Thank you very much for watching. Once again, I'm Jeff McAleer, and until I see you next time, certainly hope all of you get to enjoy plenty of great gaming with your gang.